So I kind of wanted to make a video before this whole front wheel drive thing kind of kicks off, which I kind of doubt it, but whatever. It's not impossible. Of the Traxxas front wheel drive Rustler that I have kind of cobbled together from Traxxas's relatively parts compatible system of two-wheel drive vehicles and four-wheel drive vehicles. If you notice that the front should be this way, but it is this way, and the motor is in the front, transmission is in the front, and the steering servo is in the front. I mean, it would be anyway, but so yeah, this is what I've been working on for a little while. Kind of been a lot more testing and trying to find the right parts that actually work with it. I even don't really have many of the parts to actually complete it anyways. I just kind of threw it together because if you notice, the shock is over here when it should be back here, but that's just because I happen to, for some reason, have two of the same A-arms for a four-wheel drive vehicle. And I thought that the rear A-arms of a two-wheel drive vehicle were the same as a four-wheel drive vehicle A-arms, but they aren't, so I had to get separate ones, or dig through my parts and find them. So I ended up putting wider four-wheel drive A-arms. I tried to find narrower ones, but I guess those don't really exist as far as I know. And then put four-wheel drive hubs and steering knuckles on them, and then all new drive shafts. I think these say they're four-wheel drive, but they don't fit the greatest for some reason. These are the heavier duty ones, which were the only ones that I could find, and they're $11 for the entire assembled thing, for just one of them, so it's kind of annoying, but whatever. At least I won't have to worry about these breaking. The shock tower is the same as the rear. Cut down the body post for something a while ago, and I'll have to put that back because it's actually relatively important for body mounting. So I'll have to dremel this off, drill it out, and maybe put a thread of some kind in there. Otherwise, I had to reverse the rotation of the motor, I think. But since this used to be the mid-motor slash, I didn't have to do anything because the motor would have been going this way anyway. Otherwise, I had to put a steering servo where the original steering servo would go for a mechanical speed control, which I have a vintage Rustler with the whole mechanical speed control, and if anyone doesn't know, that's why this exists, is for a steering servo to mount to, and then the mechanical speed control would mount to the servo itself, and it would all work up here. But I had to dremel out the bottom two posts down here where the where the servo mounts to, in order to fit a steering horn and the linkages, and had to dremel off some of the side of the chassis itself, as well as the sides of the battery tray and the back of the chassis where the servo horn would go. It's a lot of dremeling and fitting, and even then it's not 100% right, because if you compress the suspension enough, it'll have some toe in as it steers, so bump steer, but in this case it kind of helps, because if you're going around a corner, then it, bump steers, but if you're going straight, then it's kind of an issue. So I'll try to fix that. Otherwise, the links, I just had to make some. I had to take two of them and make this link, and even then it's not the right length. It's kind of annoying. I'll have to just get some soldered rod so I can make custom links. Otherwise, for the front, rear, I took the entire caster block assembly, instead of mounting it under oops, can't really see that. Instead of mounting it by this point and flipped around, I mounted it by the bottom here, drilled two holes out, and flipped it around. Also, while doing that, I just made sure the body post is now wing mount, I guess, and locked the steering from working. Those just required some links and adjustment for camber and stuff. So it's not much adjustment is needed in the rear per se, but it just exists due to how this is made. Given that I did not get the RPM lengthened front arms, A-arms, I had to put wheel spacers on here. These are, I think, a full inch of wheel spacers for hot racing. I had to drill these out because these were for an SEX10, the original edition, and I had to add a spacer on the wheel nut thing in order to actually keep everything tight. So other than that, I might have to look into different shock towers because I don't know how well these front shocks will work in the rear. They might work relatively well because there's no weight back here. I'll have to make them softer, I know that, because the front is set up really nicely. I think it's stock Traxxas shock oil in all of this. I think these are the linear springs and all around. So yeah, it's set up pretty nicely in the front. I'll have to soften the rear. So yeah. Otherwise, battery mount, I was gonna make it so that the battery sits back here, especially when I had the caster block assembly flip around. There's just not enough space, so the battery sits where it normally would, which would be forward weight biased. But the only thing about having the steering servo here is that you need a shorty battery, and to correctly mount that, you probably need a Velcro strap or some other way of holding it down. I just used the stock battery mount or battery hold on system, but I just put a screw over here instead of having a whole thing. I don't even know what it's called. Currently using a Castle system, Castle short cross truck system or sidebinder thing. Have been using it for a while. I think it's been in here since I got this Rustler. The receiver is just an old receiver. I think it's an AM receiver, 75 megahertz. I have a bunch of them, so I figured not really to waste it, and I have a really nice Futaba Magnum system, so it works for now until I get a better radio system. So I've seen front wheel drive buggies being having cantilever shocks and other stuff to make it a little bit more interesting. I didn't really choose to do that. I'm sure it would cut down significantly on the whole profile of it, make it a little bit lower center of gravity, but I kind of need a front body post anyways, so why not just have that be the shock tower. And speaking of bodies, this will need some sort of like modern stadium truck body, or a modern truggy body, 10 scale truggy body, which I'm trying to get, but I haven't gotten it yet. Otherwise, for mounting that, I'll have to figure out a separate body mount for back here, because the stock Traxxas system, or Traxxas body mount, is angled for some reason. Although I guess the entire thing would be angled, and so flipping that around makes sure that it's not, the suspension doesn't go this way when it compresses, which would shorten the wheelbase, which might have a certain effect for something, but I don't really know. So this might work a little bit better. I might have to brace this a little bit with having like probably a link going from this to up here, which I had previously on the mid-motor Rustler, which was kind of weird, or mid-motor slash, I guess. So things to do differently, I guess, would be probably to get proper A-arms I think if they make shorter 4-wheel drive A-arms, just get those. Shocks don't really have to mount in a particularly different location, unless if you prefer the shocks being in front of the A-arms, which would kind of bring down durability a little bit. Otherwise, I have the proper screws for everything and get threaded rods for your lengths, and try to figure out some way of having a bell crank system instead of just going off the servo horn, which only partially works. Now you might be asking why not just move this entire system up here and switch around the stuff. Is because the servo bell crank system wouldn't necessarily work or fit back here, and having everything crammed back here or up here would just look like a normal rustler, and I wanted this more to look like a truggy sort of thing. Granted, I don't really have anything to go off of because from what I can find, front wheel drive stadium trucks don't really exist, so this is kind of something to start with. Later on, I might try to make something a little bit more performance, like a standard kind of buggy thing, like make it more carbon fiber and aluminum chassis and stuff like that eventually. But this is just starting out because Traxxas made all of their parts compatible. So technically, if you wanted to, you can put rear steering on a Rustler or Stampede or whatever else vehicle you want to. It doesn't really benefit anyways. I mean, depending on vehicle you have. I don't know if this is legal to race in anything other than just a run what you have, or kind of a hooligan race or hoonigan race, whatever they're called. I don't really know actually, but I just figured I'd make it. I have run this once on a clay track. That's why I have clay tires over here that are still dirty. And you will have to only use either modern Rustler, I think they're 2.5 rims to fit on here, because the 4-wheel drive hubs don't fit standard stadium truck tires or 2.2s. So you'll have to either use short cross truck tires or modern Rustler tires, which I think I might end up doing anyway, just to have stadium Rustler pin spikes on all 4 tires, just to make it look more stadium truck. But for the time being, just short cross truck tires work. But otherwise, jumping this is awesome. It works really well around the track. If I had that set up right, I'm sure it would actually take advantage of the advantages that it would have. Because the front wheel drive variants of things normally work better, has their own advantages over 2-wheel drive, rear wheel drive vehicles. But jumping this thing is very nice. You do have to floor it or pin it when you go over the jump, and in the air to keep the nose from diving, which is a lot better, I guess, than normally, because usually you have the right, if it was a standard 2-wheel drive, rear wheel drive vehicle, all of the weight would be in the back, and the mass of the tires would cause it to further go backwards. So this just is a little bit easier to drive, and kind of goes with the rotational inertia of the vehicle, I guess. So, you ever just have a bunch of parts lying around and you aren't afraid of doing dremeling and drilling, I guess, because you have to drill some holes? This wouldn't be... I would recommend doing this just because it's awesome, and I actually really like how this thing handles. It can probably go a lot faster than some other buggies, even though it's fairly weighty for what it is. I'm sure this probably compares up to a Rustler of the same upgrades, just rear wheel drive, or rear wheel drive, whatever. It's confusing looking at this thing, and even track marshals get confused when they have to put a vehicle backwards. So yeah, that's about all that I have to say about this for now. Anyway, you just kind of want to make this video again before before kind of a front wheel drive thing happens. I don't know. It seems to be several points of RC that kind of phases of RC. You know, currently the no prep stuff, and then possibly front wheel drive stuff. I don't know. So, especially with the ORB buggy coming out, or teasing about coming out, whatever it's actually doing, this might be something that happens just because it would be fun to see front wheel drive race vehicles. So, yeah. Lucas out. Bye, YouTube. Or wherever I'm posting this, I guess.